So good morning to everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm José Teixeira. I'm the communication officer of CIMAR, the Marine Institute, Research Institute in Porto, Portugal. Thank you for this invitation. I'm very happy to moderate this session. Just some quick remarks. We will have 3 sessions of 15 minutes. I ask for the speakers to make it in 12 minutes, so we have 3 minutes questions and answers. Please, if everybody have some question, you can use the chat, and I will pick some of the questions from the chat. Please make it specific and objective, short questions. And I introduce the first speaker, that is Amy Dozier. For those that don't know her, Amy is a graphic designer, illustrator, and a visual science communicator. She's currently living in Cork, Ireland, and she will give us this first chat, this first communication that is about the value of visual science communication. And so the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Dozier, and I'm a visual science communicator at MARI, which is a research center at University College Cork in Ireland. And I work on a number of European-funded research projects, helping to communicate science and engage stakeholders and public audiences. But the project that I want to talk about today is EcoStructure. And EcoStructure is an Interreg Ireland-Wales funded project that brings together 5 universities to address the topic of eco-engineering in the Irish Sea. So to provide some context, a significant percentage of people in Ireland and Wales live or work near the coast. And to protect these coastal communities and related infrastructure from climate change, our shorelines have become increasingly hardened by defense structures, such as seawalls or breakwaters. The problem is that these structures often replace natural rocky shore habitat with surfaces that are difficult for marine species to colonize, like concrete, for example. So in response to this, EcoStructure is testing eco-engineering designs for coastal structures to see if they can help compensate for these impacts and the loss of intertidal habitat. These enhancements can either be retrofitted to existing structures or built into new ones. So the goal is to provide habitat for marine species without and improve biodiversity without affecting the primary function of these coastal defenses. So here's just some images of some eco-engineering designs that we've been testing. These are artificial rock pools that can be bolted onto seawalls or drilled into surfaces that provide shelter to marine organisms as the tide recedes. And as we know, coastal biodiversity can provide ecosystem services, and an abundance of life supports recreation and fishing too. So eco-engineering is all about incorporating benefits for wildlife and people into the built environment. But the challenge with this project is to communicate the research in a way that gets people's attention and holds it so that they walk away understanding the value of this nature-based solution. And the key to facilitating this is an effective visual communication strategy. So before I get into some examples, I just want to talk about why high-quality visuals are important. And I'm sure a lot of this is obvious, but they're just a really quick and effective way to glean information and provide a shortcut to understanding. The picture superiority effect explains that we're better at learning from and retaining information from images than we are from text. So visual material can improve both our comprehension and our memory of information. And I would argue that it helps grab and hold our attention as well. Surveys have showed that as many as 2/3 of us would call ourselves visual learners. So on top of that, graphics can also help improve understanding for people who aren't fluent in the language that's being presented. So when it comes to science communication about the oceans, it's really important that we don't leave out the visual element, and not just photos and videos of the ocean and the coast and all the life in it, but also illustrations and good design that explain the science and large-scale processes and make our science look good and accessible. And I've just added a photo there of a drawing of a halibut made 20,000 years ago in a cave in Spain, to show that we've been using visual illustrations to tell stories and increase understanding for millennia. So from the outset, EcoStructure wanted to create a science communication strategy that shared the project's research across a range of materials and audiences. So we've harnessed graphic design and illustration to stand out, to help capture audience attention and to clarify our research messages. But creating these resources requires a lot of communication. Some researchers can be very cautious about how their research is conveyed. So it's essential to establish a positive and ongoing and iterative relationship with them to ensure that the science is communicated effectively and accurately and continuously to diverse audiences. So let me just walk you through some of our outputs. This is a fact sheet that we produced about the invasive species Dedendum vexillum, which is also called the carpet sea squirt. And EcoStructure has been looking at whether coastal structures facilitate the spread of non-native species like this one. And all of these resources are, of course, available on our website for those interested in exploring them. So a lot of scientific topics can be very text heavy, and they really demand a lot of your audience. So by breaking up the content into a question and answer format, we give people the opportunity to focus on the information and context of the research in digestible amounts. So we also found that this format lends itself well to schools. So we put a crossword on the back that uses the information on the front, and this allowed us to put all of the references in there at the bottom. So in the small space, we've tried to maximize our outputs there. And I've also just added a figure as well that I created to show the work being done by Melanie Prentice, who collaborated with me on this work. And it just illustrates the methodology she used in one of her experiments. So figures like this are great for taking complex research methodology and putting it in a graphic format that breaks it down into understandable bits and allows you to be able to explain it to anyone. Here's another fact sheet that we produced to communicate the problem of invasive species. And by keeping the graphics fairly simple, you won't overwhelm the page and the text content. In visual science communication, it's really important, but also very challenging to find a balance between text and design so that they work with each other instead of distracting from each other. So typically I try and limit the amount of text as much as possible, but obviously this can be quite the challenge when working with researchers who want to express their complex work as clearly as they can. So overall, though, I would caution that to keep things readable, you limit the amount of text for visual formats such as these, because the more concise that you keep the text, the more effective the visuals are. And this is why we see such a prevalence of infographics around the web. You can keep lengthy descriptions for more in-depth pieces like articles, blogs, or features in which the visuals are secondary to the actual text. Here is an example of our newsletters. These are just a few example pages that I've taken from them. We put these out once a year to sum up our research. And one thing that I've stressed when putting these together is that they don't need to be just about results. I encourage the team to provide progress updates and to even discuss failures or their own personal experiences. And as we all know, it's important to humanize and democratize science in order to encourage people to engage with research and to pursue STEM careers. And part of that is making it look attractive. So really, we want these newsletters to be as visually appealing as possible, rather like a magazine instead of just a dry Word document. We're lucky in this project that it's highly fieldwork based, so we have a lot of images to draw from. But if you don't, and your project is more, for example, modeling based, you can use open source images as long as they're really high quality. And I've added a recommended resource at the end of this presentation to find photos like those. We also have a citizen science platform as part of the project, which actually my colleague Sonya Agnew will be talking about later in this session. And part of the project is examining whether climate change and coastal structures are working in tandem to expand the ranges of seashore snail species. So whether coastal structures for climate change are acting as stepping stones for snails, helping them to occupy more northerly habitats with warmer and milder winters that we'll see in the future. So to inform this research, we are encouraging individuals and families to go out to coastal structures or rock pools and count 3 key snail species and log their data in our dedicated online platform. But in order to help people go out and do that, they need to be able to identify these species. So we produced this field guide that discusses the context of this research and how to identify the species we're looking at, and it explains how to upload your observations and photos to the citizen science platform. It's also a trifold, so you can print it, fold it, take it with you, or if you prefer, you can view it online. And this kind of visual communication is designed to be used across age groups. I've also had the pleasure of working with partners on figures for upcoming publications. And apologies as I've had to watermark these and remove some of the data because they've not been published yet. But I just wanted to show you some of the ways in which we've tried to make the science more understandable. On the left, we've added simple illustrations showing the methodology and how the data scales up with representative species there, along with some illustrations showing the method of obtaining the data, so you can see the type of photogrammetry technique that was used. And on the right, we've broken down a methodology used in the project into a step-by-step approach and illustrating each point of the process used in EcoStructure along the way. And finally, because we've been testing these eco-engineering designs around the Irish Sea, we've also put up information boards near our experiments to inform people who live or work or play in these coastal areas. These are designed to raise awareness about eco-engineering solutions, but also to direct people to our citizen science platform. So we're providing people with information about eco-engineering designs they might start to see popping up in the future near them and encouraging them to engage with us. The signs also have another function in helping us to encourage good behavior. So they ask people not to disturb the installations and the experiments or the wildlife found in them. And for the signs that went up in Wales, we had them translated into Welsh alongside the English. And this is something that I just think is really important. Translating resources is essential because if you only release your items in English, that massively reduces your audience and your impact. So working with translators and adding in visuals can really improve the accessibility of research across geographic and socioeconomic backgrounds. So what's next? Interreg Ireland Wales has given us an 18th month extension to continue our work, which is great because that means we'll be able to keep producing resources like this and improving upon them. So we'll be working on infographics about an acoustic telemetry study that we'll be conducting, which will inform new eco-engineering designs for offshore wind farms. And we're also putting up more public signage about our experiments and producing policy briefs to encourage the uptake of eco-engineering designs. And just some final notes here. One of our biggest challenges is figuring out how to improve and measure our impact. And I'd be keen to hear from anyone who has suggestions in this regard, because we'd like to be able to better assess this and the materials that we're creating. The other challenge is that good design is time consuming. So sometimes people expect a really quick turnaround, especially if they've got a deadline to install an experiment somewhere. So it's important to manage expectations and allow yourself enough time for the work to be done, particularly if translation is involved like it is for our project. So I can't stress enough the importance of setting deadlines that are pretty further down the line so that you're able to have time to create the best possible output. You'll also see some resources and suggestions there. Unsplash.com is a brilliant resource of images that have been made open source by photographers, and they're really high quality. So I recommend that if you ever need anything for your outputs. And canva.com is also a great online platform for creating just about anything you might need. I regularly use it when I'm really short on time, or if I want to create social media graphics really quickly to accompany content. So it's a great way also, if you're new to this, of kind of breaking in and seeing what you're able to produce. And again, I can't stress the value of good fonts. You can download some nice ones from Google for free, or you can invest in some tried and true professional fonts. But this really will transform your work and take it from being, the default to something that's more and better. And also, don't be afraid of white space. It's essential to give your content as much breathing room as possible, particularly when you're communicating these really dense messages. So don't overload the page. Edit things down as much as possible, group bits together, and give things space so that people don't feel overwhelmed by the content. So that's it. And just thank you to my colleagues for their support and collaboration, and thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy. We are just in time for the next presentation. I would just make maybe one quick question myself and one from the audience. We have this pandemic going on where the present the activities with the people are limited. Did that affect the project itself? Did you pass some of these tools to online tools, for instance? Have you thought on this transformation of the products into digital tools, for instance?
I think as far as our project goes, it definitely interrupted our, physical field work. But on the communication side, it's actually great because more people, I think, have been engaging online. And when you have really high quality visual stuff, it helps people, it helps you stand out so that more people take notice of your work. So in terms of the communication side, I think it's actually been great for us because more people are tuning in from around the world because these conferences, workshops, and resources have been made available. And I think that really increases the accessibility as well of these kinds of resources. So I actually think that in a way, for communication, it's been great that we're able to reach people around the world more than ever before.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions that are a bit similar, that are from people that comes from the research area, and they want to know how to start as a visual artist. Do you have some?
Like I said, that website Canva is great because it gives you some constraints. It provides you templates and things so that you're able to start, not just with a blank page. Sometimes the blank page can be so difficult when you're thinking, I need to create something, to make for a workshop or something, and that's very intimidating. So websites like that can be really good for starting with something that can give you, a structure and a format to work in. And they've got lots of free resources and images that you can drop in and make it your own. So I would definitely recommend that. Otherwise, just for starting out and learning, YouTube has so many resources and free videos that you can watch if you just Google, graphic design or beginners with that kind of thing. And also, there's websites like Skillshare as well that have a lot of content that some of it is free, most of it's behind a paywall, but some of the free resources are really great for getting started in that.
Okay, thank you. We will have maybe some time at the end of this session for some more questions. I'm passing to Raquel Neves. She's a researcher at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and she will bring us a video about marine science communication and local community, a Brazilian study case. Angel, can you put this video for us, please? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Raquel Neves. I'm from the Federal University of the State of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and I'm head of the research group Experimental and Applied Aquatic Ecology. I'm going to present to you the study Marine Science Communication and Local Community, a Brazilian case study. I would like to thank the CommOCEAN for the opportunity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Brazilian scenario in science communication. And we are just a child, but in the last years it has increased in Brazilian universities and research institutions. It was basically stimulated by the public investments. Since 2004, we have the National Week of Science and Technology, and it has been very important to people know about science in Brazil. Here I just present you some photos of a session from the third symposium of the graduation program in Tropical Biodiversity. It was last year, and I'm professor from this program, and also I'm from the organizing committee of the symposium, and it was a very nice event of science communication in my university, and we have received more than 100 kids from public schools, and more than 40 projects have presented some kinds of activity in science communication, and I'm very proud of it. If you want to know more about it, you can just access our website. Every year, the Brazilian Center for Management and Strategic Studies publishes the public perception of science and technology in Brazil. It's basically based on interviews with Brazilians. And last year, they just realized that 90% of people who were interviewed did not remember the name of a Brazilian scientist. And also 88% of subjects could not indicate the name of a research institution in Brazil. However, more than 60% of the subjects have demonstrated interest for science and technology and environmental issues. So I ask you, what are we missing here? Based on these perceptions, my colleagues and I are trying to do something about it. So we are just developing marine science communication in the context of research projects. And the first was the EcoShift, a pioneering, innovative, integrated, and predictive proposal for the sustainable management of multi-impacted coastal lagoons. That was approved last year, and it's an ongoing project. It's financially supported by the Foundation of Research Support of the State of Rio de Janeiro, FAPERJ. This project is developed in Rodrigo de Freitas Lagoon, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This lagoon has multiple uses, but also several issues like harmful algal blooms, organic and chemical pollutions, invasive species, and much more. So we are using social media to communicate, like Instagram and Facebook. Here it's a project, an extension project that I'm the coordinator. It calls Conhecendo as Raves, that in English is Knowing the Raves. And we just talk about the impact of HABs and how to avoid HABs and the health problems related to HABs. And it's basically to talk about the harmful algal blooms. That is not very new in Brazil. We are also participating in podcasts and interviews on TV. Here it was a podcast that we talked about how to recover a lagoon. And here's my colleague that talked about the plastic problems in marine environments in Global TV. Global is an open channel in Brazil. It's a very, very important open channel. We are also working on short movies. We have an ongoing project for Rodrigo de Freitas Lagoon in collaboration with Instituto Mar Urbano. that in English is Urban Sea Institute. And Ricardo, that is the head of the institute, has a lot of experience in the production of subaquatic movies to science communication. It's a very important project for us, and it's our first collaboration with the institute, and we hope that we can access more people and also talk about the conservation and using short movies. We are also concerned about the local community. So we are developing small meetings and presentations using videos and photos for artisanal fishermen. We have a collaboration with the Fishing Association of Rio de Janeiro City that we call Colônias e 13. We have already promoted the meetings in Copacabana and Rodrigo de Freitas Lagoon, but unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to stop the meetings and the presentations, and we hope to continue this after the pandemic. So we believe that our efforts on marine science communication contribute to improve science education and public engagement in conservation and also management of marine systems. We believe that artisanal fishermen may be a very powerful tool to collaborate for conservation of marine systems. Then we are just trying to approximate them to our efforts in marine sciences. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be glad to answer any question by mail. You can just write me, okay? And if you anytime we'll be in Rio, you can visit us in our university. That's just a few steps away from the Praia Vermelha Beach. That is a beautiful place to visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. I don't see any questions in the chat. Please, if you have some questions, put it in the chat. We are just in time anyway, so we can pass to the next presentation and we can leave the general questions for the final discussion to the panel. So we have our last speaker, Sonya Agnew. She's a postdoc researcher at the School of Biology and Environmental Science of the University College of Dublin, and she will share with us the ECOSTRUCTURE Observatory, a novel online citizen science mapping tool to engage coastal communities. So Sonia, thank you.
Sorry.
The floor is yours.
Shared it too soon. Here we go.
Okay.
Can you see? Yeah, okay. Hi,
Yes.
everyone. Thank you to all the organisers of the conference. Really excited to be here today. It's a great opportunity to hear about all the fascinating research and things that are going on. And also to thank everyone for logging in this morning and to listen to myself and of course the others also. So my presentation today is on the EcoStructure Observatory, which is a novel online citizen science mapping platform in order to engage coastal communities and stakeholders with the broader research of the EcoStructure project. So I'll briefly introduce myself, Sonya Agnew, postdoctoral research fellow in University College Dublin. I'm working on the project with Amy, who presented the first lot in this morning's session. So while there may be some slight overlaps in the presentation, I hopefully won't bore people doubling up on info. So I suppose briefly about the EcoStructure project. EcoStructure is part funded by the ERDF through the Interreg Ireland-Wales programme 2014-2020. The idea here is to examine, develop and test ecologically sensitive design for artificial coastal structures to the benefit of both coastal community and coastal environments also along the sea. So it has that social and environmental focus. It's a transdisciplinary project and brings together 5 universities across Ireland and Wales from numerous disciplines, including natural science. Myself, I'm a social scientist, so please don't direct too many difficult ecological questions my direction, but we'd be happy to pass them on if anybody should have some. But also we work together with coastal engineers, the science communication team, of course. Yeah, and I suppose we're involved hugely with various different stakeholders beyond the project as well, as you can imagine. So the background really here of what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do, is engage communities in new ways with the kind of science that is going on in the project, in this quite complex, really, transdisciplinary research project, which is now going on 4 years and it's extending further into the future. So as you can see from the images here on my left, the coastline, you can see some natural shorelines, and on the right hand side we have artificial ones. So we see that the coastlines of Ireland and Wales, like many coastlines around the world, are becoming increasingly urbanised, which means, of course, that there's more and more artificial structures being built or repaired, etc., in order to defend coastlines and communities against the impacts of climate change, floods and storms, erosion, but also to provide a lot of services, transport, leisure, looking forward to, the different demands of I suppose, of human society, looking at new ways of developing renewable energy, but also, I suppose, industry, so aquaculture as well. Now, these artificial structures are often poor habitats for native species, according to the best science, but they also may act as corridors for the natural dispersal of invasive species. So there are a number of complex natural science issues which are being looked at by the team, and I suppose part of what we're doing is bringing that message to the public. So here again on the left, we have just again artificial structures. So we have some breakwaters here, seawall, and then some steps. So we see, access, defence, and a bit of both here. So some of the experiments, the ecological eco-sensitive design that's been that's part of our project are, for example, here we have some bolt-on tiles. So these are bolted on the seawall, the intertidal zone. So this is a Malahide Marina in County Dublin. And these are tiles in Wexford, which have been up for a while. And you see that, they're starting to kind of change, with the impacts of tides and various species. Other enhancements that our team are looking at are these drilled pits and crevices. So here on the breakwaters themselves and along rocky shore, artificial structures. And here at the bottom, we see one of our researchers, Dr. Paul Brooks, working very hard, creating these new enhancements along the shoreline on the artificial structures. So so the EcoStructure Observatory then is attempting to, successfully enough, to engage the public with what the engineers and the natural scientists and ecologists are doing. So it's an online citizen science platform. it's to facilitate knowledge and enhance exchange between researchers, coastal communities, on the different topics which reflect, I suppose, the synergistic interaction between all these diverse disciplines within the project. And as I think Amy said earlier as well, you know, the kind of communication that needs to go on in-house between all these different disciplines in 2 separate countries across 5 different universities, and to try and somehow bring that together in such a way that we can create a platform and a cohesive dynamic exchange with the non-academic community. So the participatory activities that are facilitated on the observatory include mapping and identifying coastal structures, marine species, and the sharing of local personal or historic knowledge and stories with about the artificial structures. What's the next one? So the citizen science then itself, just very briefly, if some viewers are not familiar. So basically citizen science is when members of the public or non-academic community get involved in science projects or research activities in a very active way. Of course, people that live locally can have extensive knowledge about numerous different things that is really beneficial for researchers to know. So the idea of creating a citizen science realm is to address real world problems, enable communities to contribute to real life science through collecting. And there's many different types of citizen science projects. So in some, people can collect or generate data, they map locations and data, which is relevant to what we're doing. They make or document new discoveries. Again, this tapping into local knowledge is really, really key for researchers, you know, because and given the opportunity for local people to become part of a dialogue, in order then to enhance and support kind of collaboration and inclusion between local people, what's going on in research, and those that make the decisions, and in order to, I suppose, develop effective and coherent policy depending on the subject. So that's that. So this back then again to our EcoStructure platform. So as you can see here, we have the projects, 3 separate projects. So we have Stories in Coastal Structures, Eco-Sensitive Design, which is actually just about to come online, excited about that, and the Change in Sea Life, our Seashore Snail Survey. So I'll just start with the Changing Sea Life Seashore Snail Survey. Amy did touch on this earlier because she is behind some of these fantastic communication identification guides. And the idea here is that the citizen science activity itself stems from one of our scientists in Aberystwyth, who's looking at the impact of climate change on particular species of seashore snail. And I suppose the hypothesis behind this is that coastal defences, artificial ones, can provide homes, as you can see here, but also it can perhaps inhibit them, I suppose, going from one place to another. And so there's concern here that as we need more coastal defences, as climate change and the impacts of them become more challenging, that you know, we need to look at and start understanding what kind of effects that these structures are going to have on these intertidal species. So here I'm moving on to stories and coastal structures. Oh no, sorry, no, make mistake. So very quickly back. So this platform then, yes, you go click back on your Change in Sea Life. That will bring you to your mapping options. Here we have the Seashore Snail Survey, and there's a rollover button. Then coming down, this will then show you a map. So the citizen scientist, if you like, is encouraged then to add an entry, which will then, once submitted, will also appear on the map with our little snail icon. And here's an example of some of the entries that we have. So hopefully this is big enough for people to be able to see. So there's a number of questions here that are important for Joe, our scientist in Aberystwyth, to know. So what kind of a shoreline have people found? The seashore snail, so these 3 seashore snails that he's looking for. So here we have natural rocky shore. The number of minutes, the kind of, the number of people involved in the survey, how many types of a particular species that people find. And he also is asking, or we're asking people to upload photos so that we can ID them as well, because people can use the identification guide, but also I suppose to ensure that the data that we're collecting is accurate for research purposes, and to understand and to reach the goals of the survey overall. And here, sorry, my little Zoom thing is in the way. And here our map allows us to really kind of zoom in and for the each specific entry. Here's some more just kind of examples. Again, College Rock. So this is an example in excuse me, in Wales. Sorry, I have to move this over here. And again, just we have a natural rock shoreline, and here's some really, really good pictures, which are really important for the scientists to see. And I think it's really good, and some feedback we've had is that people are really kind of happy to see that, what they're finding is relevant and useful as well. And then we have an example here of then on an artificial structure, somebody from Swansea, I have left the names out obviously for GDPR purposes, an entry here of some dog whelk. So that includes them both. So we're gathering some really good information both across natural and artificial structures, which is really exciting. Okay, so the second top participant activity on the observatory are stories about our coastal structures. This activity is really is based, I suppose, theoretically underpinned by a cultural ecosystem services approach, which is looking at, I suppose, the lesser tangible cultural values that people have of their local area. So for example, if we're looking at adapting and enhancing coastal structures, seawalls, etc., because of climate change, in order to protect and enhance biodiversity in these areas, we really need to understand as well how do people feel about specific structures, So I won't read all this out, but basically cultural ecosystem services don't just simply arise from ecosystems, but they're co-constructed through the interaction between people and environments. So what cultural ecosystem services are about then is about sense of place, identity, aesthetics, recreation and kind of spiritual value. And a lot of this thus far has really is often lacking in a lot of studies to do with kind of environmental change and coastal engineering. Most of the research thus far really has focused on kind of the ecological, environmental and economic end of things, and less or so on engaging local communities and individuals or people who use it, who use the space on a for holidays or whatever. The idea here then is that we do really we need to understand how people feel about their area in order to engage coherently with people and effectively, in order to understand their perspectives of their coastal structures, and to enable dialogue regarding effective policy making when it comes to adapting these coastal structures to climate change and the challenges that we're all facing. And however, I suppose a major reason, or some of the reasons why cultural ecosystem services are often lacking, is because they are complex, they're less quantifiable than the other ecosystem service categories, they're challenging to categorize and to isolate. They're very diverse, and they're often really interwoven. And so I think therefore it's a really good idea, I think, and we're getting some really good input on capturing some of those attributes, cultural ecosystem services, via mapping, which is quite exciting. That it seems to be working really well. So I'll show you some examples. So stories about coastal structures. So this is our map, our lovely icon here. I've just isolated one or two. So here's an example of some of the questions that we're asking. So it's not a survey, and I suppose we're probing people about why they go, about what it is about their coastal structure that is of value to them. So here, a participant, North Pole Wall, which is over here, is in County Dublin, and this person says that they go swimming there. The view, the coastscape, they like to swim. So we're looking at, there's recreation, there's a kind of boardwalk, lighthouse at the top. So, I suppose once we're analysing this kind of data, we're going to start looking at categorising some of these points. And also, it's really wonderful that we're having these images as well, provided, because I do think that this imagery is really, really important in us gauging why people value their structures in different ways. Oh, sorry, where's it gone? No. I missed a slide. Whoops. So we had a number of really, really interesting inputs and historical stories in some cases that people from local residents, historical residents associations provided us with some really, really interesting material on how particular walls were built and the machinery that was used, and the changes that have happened over time. So we're making really good headway on this particular project. So I suppose coming to an end. So why really? So as I said previously, a lot of the research so far really has focused on the interventions and the enhancements within the ecological environmental sense. So our approach of mapping citizen science can provide very new ways in exchanging knowledge, support perspectives across disciplines. Now, we know citizen science is not new. We know citizen science is around many, many hundreds of years. Charles Darwin engaged with citizen science. Edward Halley engaged with citizen science in order to work out the accuracy of stars. And we see that, however, what we do need to look at is that citizen science and engaging the public in what we do can actually enhance and perspectives actually across disciplines. So, especially in the EcoStructure project, we're seeing that the natural scientists, the marine ecologists are engaging with me, the social scientist, with our communications team, Amy spoke earlier, of bringing all these skills together in such a way that we're actually enabling the public to really get involved. And I think what Amy had to say previously really is about the ways that we communicate with people and making science accessible, plays a really, really important role in that, and not just as an add-on, but also as part of the overall research process and how we plan this. We do need new ways to engage stakeholders, and I think this is, online mapping is a really, really good way of doing that, and particularly with COVID, as the previous speaker said, we did run into some real problems there because of the pandemic, because of course we don't want to engage people just merely online, but a lot of our face-to-face obviously didn't happen. And as well as that, in Ireland, we had up until recently a 5-kilometre movement ban, although we can for work. However, we're not going to ask individuals to go beyond their limitations and put themselves in harm's way in order for us to get our data. So, but however, the online platform, I think there's ease of use there, and I think people are happy to engage, and also I think people like to look back and see what's happening, and I think there's a dynamism there, but also it's important for us as researchers to realize that local communities have a lot of knowledge, but that we also need to play a supportive role in providing them with education materials, so that it is a two-way street. So yeah, so and actually we have another project, so we're going to have a third project coming soon. So this is Sea Life Along the Seashore. So this particular project is really looking at the enhancements I showed earlier from the natural shoreline and the artificial shoreline. So we're looking at that people can get involved in looking for sea life along the seashore. We'll have an ID guide, and through that then to kind of bring people step by step to the concept of kind of eco engineering in a practical and fun way. So yeah, so I think that's me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia. So we now have about 10 minutes for the final discussion. We have some questions on the chat, and some of them are for you, Sonia. I will ask you a couple of them. I will join 2 or 3 together.
I'm having some problems. Pardon me, sorry, I didn't hear that.
Okay, we have a couple of questions for you in the chat. I will put them. One of the questions is about how to, let me just, how to bring citizens these ways to report information, how to get them to know the specific needs of data and engage them to participate. Linked to this, I wanted to ask you also if all data that is sent to the platform, if it is validated by experts, and how do you manage this this step that is sometimes very time consuming? And a question from Chris Leakey that is related with this, that is for the idea of the snails by citizen scientists. Have you tried integrating the use of iNaturalist AP app? So I don't know if you know about this app that is probably some help to identify also snails. So this, can you try to answer to these 3 questions, and then we pass to the others?
Yeah, so I think the first one was about how to kind of to get people engaged. Is it? I think a lot of it is to do with what your aim is. You know, if I think as Amy said previously, communication is really, really important. A misconception, I think, with citizen science is you create it and they will come. That's not the case. You'd be very lucky researcher if that was the case. Depending on the kind, I mean, it really comes down to the research design that you have. If you're looking for something specific in a particular area, like noise pollution or air pollution on a particular road, of course you go specifically to those people. But a lot of citizen science projects are you know, on a national level. We have one here in Ireland, Clean Coast, which is really taken off. And that's where local people go and they remove litter, you know, from their local coastline. And actually that itself has helped us hugely with our citizen science project indirectly, I think, because we already have now people who are really engaged in environmental stewardship of sorts along their local area. And you know, it has created this kind of national movement, which really has been something that has been huge benefit to us. I hope that answers your question. I think, you know, again, just I think at research design level, you kind of need to really think about who you need to answer the questions. I mean, there's so many community groups, volunteer groups, all these kind of things which we've used. The idea for us was to actually combine the citizen science platform with community engagement face to face, with community meetings and go and talk to people, but that all was stopped because of the pandemic. So while it probably hasn't been as successful as it could have been, I think I think nonetheless, direct contact was made, phoning people, writing emails, Twitter, and really just keeping kind of the awareness going. Yeah. As regards then the second issue of validation again, we have the two types that are going on at the moment of research. So one is the seashore snail. So the Joe, our ecologist over in Aberystwyth with the PI of the project, that's he I suppose he's keeping an eye on that, and that's why we have the facility there for people to upload photographs so that he can then visually ID the snails and kind of make sure that it is the same species that that people are answering the question on. Of course, I mean, it does happen. People don't upload photographs, or there can be technical issues, and that doesn't happen. So, but as regards the cultural ecosystem services, that's a very different thing. You can't really validate why something is important to somebody, or when I think concerns and worries, that's something that then need to be addressed. And that's, I suppose, why cultural ecosystem services tend to be perhaps the ecosystem services poor brother, that doesn't really get the same amount of focus, because it's not as easy just to validate how somebody or how a community may feel about a particular structure or anything else. Sorry, I've forgotten the third question.
It was about an app.
Oh, the snail app.
The snail.
I'd be really interested in it, but I haven't heard of it. But I'd be really interested in passing that on to Joe in Aberystwyth. I'd say he'd be very interested in that. Yeah.
Okay. Raquel, I saw that you have a couple of questions also about legacy. Do you want to put them yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. On the chat, I've asked a couple of questions to Raquel as well, and she gladly responded to that. But it's a question to Amy and Sonia, because I understand you are part of the same project, and you put a lot of effort, and it's great that's to hear that the funding has been extended. But I'm just wondering, you put a lot of effort, and I think it's also in general with all these projects, that's especially scientific projects that go for a short duration. Do you have any plans for the legacy, also not only for the citizen science platform, but also for all these visual reports that maybe at some point you will have to update it with the project results and so on? Do you have any legacy plan within these projects? And also, if you can share any best practices on how to continue the actions without, let's say, the initial funding.
Will I jump in, Amy?
Yes, please.
It was actually, your thing was still on mute on the screen. Again, thanks for your question. We're currently working on with the Dublin Bay Biosphere it's at very early stages, and it's they're whereby we're providing some information for their website, so it gives it a new platform. And I know Amy has also, but I've been heavily involved in outreach across Ireland and Wales, trying to to promote the citizen science project using all these wonderful tools that Amy has and her team have developed in Cork, in order to promote the work, and in a way to because these things now exist, to allow a longevity of sorts. Of course, the platform itself, that's then slightly trickier, of course, because I mean, you from a research institute, you go through you do go through ethics process. You know, there's data protection, there's a lot of different stipulations there about how long you can hang on to data for, what it's needed. And so I think as researchers, we really do have to look at those issues very carefully. You know, if somebody signs up to do something and they think, okay, in 3 years this data will be destroyed or whatever, but actually it's floating around online somewhere, while it mightn't be damaging or dangerous, it's not good practice. And I do think we need to, as researchers, really start having a conversation about those kind of topics, because it is new, and when I think you're under pressure to get a project out and there's all kinds of things going wrong and all kinds of delays in research funding and God knows what else, and trying to get staff, and that obviously the aim of the game is just to get that thing rolling out, and research being such a transitionary process sometimes, I think these things can fall aside a bit. And I think, yeah, I think it's important really as researchers we start looking at how to really tighten up the edges on data, really. If that's Amy.
I think you covered it. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I think there is a big issue with GDPR. From the communication side, it's a bit easier because yes, we can provide our resources to places like the Dublin Bay Biosphere, who then host, you know, for example, our snail guide on their platform. But you know, for the rest of it, it does get more complicated.
Mm.
Okay, so I think we reached the end of this session. It is already about 12:30. So thank you very much to all the participants, to the speakers and to the host, Angel, thank you. And I want to invite you to this lunch break of half an hour. We will have the show and tell exhibition at 1 o'clock. Central Time. So please join and don't forget to vote on your favorite history. And we'll see together at 1 o'clock. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. I just put it on the chat, so I will open the meeting for a couple of minutes so people can click through it. But see you at 1.